Hello, I am Professor Andy Singer with Lourdes University. I'm a professor of business and the MBA director at Lourdes. And today, fortunately, I've got Chuck Anderson of the Andersons here, who's going to be answering some questions about the MBA program. Chuck is in a really unique and excellent space to do this because he's going to be graduating with his MBA degree from Lourdes University. So Chuck, could you tell us what your title is here at the Andersons and what your responsibilities entail?
So first of all, so happy to finally meet you in person. You were an instructor of mine for 3 different courses, and quite frankly, I just finished those courses and thought I was done answering questions, but you came back. So I'm not a big person on titles, but if you're going to have a title, I actually enjoy the fact Vice President and General Manager of the Liquid Specialty business here at the Andersons. It's a great role, love it. I don't care about the titles, but the role is outstanding. What I'm accountable for is the profit and loss of that business. It's about a $120 million business, and the safety of those employees, about 150 employees. So it's a great responsibility, very fulfilling.
That is a great responsibility, Chuck. That's impressive. And I wonder, how did the MBA program help you to be prepared for that type of responsibility?
So I remember a call I had with Frank at our organization, and I was saying, hey, I'm struggling with a few things in my current role. At that time, I had 4 sales teams. I didn't have the operations, the whole organization I didn't have. So it was a sort of a slice of the commercial role. And he said, I would love you to join our MBA program. And so before I know it, I just got pulled right in. And quite frankly, what a blessing, because it filled so many holes that I had my own capabilities. In most particular, the areas that I needed, because early in your career, you tend to focus on like the technical aspects of your job. So I spent 25 years in this turf industry, right? So I'm completely out of the turf industry now. So my whole life was focusing on that knowledge, turf. But it wasn't about, it becomes, as you go up the organization, you have to hand that off to your folks, like that technical responsibility. You have to be much more capable on the social aspects, the political aspects, the financial aspects, the strategic aspects. Those were the areas that really started to fill in the gaps that I had. So every time you go up another ring of the ladder, there's things that you never learned in your undergraduate that you're totally unprepared for. And it's either learning by trial and error, or you got to get some education. A little bit of both is ideal. So quite frankly, I would put the financial, the social, and the strategic as the most important things that I learned in the MBA program. It really helped fill it out for me.
That's fantastic and well said, because often when we talk about the program, we talk about some of these components that you're mentioning are probably going to be the most important to you in your career. Things like leadership, decision making, finance, and strategy, right? Because you don't pick those up anywhere else other than an MBA type program and the School of Hard Knocks once you get to that level, of course.
Yeah.
So this brings up an interesting question with your response. Do you feel there were some courses that were sort of your favorites that you learned the most from, enjoyed the most? And if there were, why were those specific courses your favorites?
So it's interesting because you see your course schedule and you can only look essentially, or I only looked at the title. I look at the title and make a decision, or I'd start to think about what is that class going to be like? And I saw this one coming up. It was budgeting, planning, and implementation. I think that's what it was called. Had an amazing teacher. And it sounded really dry, quite frankly. And I got into it, and like 2 or 3 sessions in, I say to my professor, Singer, I say, this is about strategy. They've misnamed this course. It's so important at this level. As you go higher up in the organization, strategy becomes so important. It's not just about how you beat your competition. It's how you fulfill a role in society. And so getting that your whole organization to fit into what are we trying to accomplish? It's almost like, what is our purpose? And so you have to fulfill a role in society if you're going to get paid. And ultimately that a lot of that just starts to trickle down. It's like, what's our role that we're trying to fulfill in society? And does it pay? And if it pays, you got to start putting the steps in behind that, the planning and budgeting. And to me, that was the most satisfying course. It was fun, a lot of fun. And I appreciate how you taught that course. It was outstanding.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that, Chuck. And the good news is your wish has been granted. We've now renamed the course, and it's officially Crafting and Executing Strategy.
I love it.
Which is, it tells it like it is and what the course is about, which is great.
That's a better name.
Let's suppose there were people in the room right now who were considering the MBA program. Before they make a decision, what things would you suggest they consider?
So it's funny because I got recruited by a couple different universities back 20 years ago. And my daughter had just been born, and I was like, you know, I have to be focused on my child. And quite frankly, I could have easily done it when she was 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever, because I had put so much stock in raising her. And quite frankly, my wife was staying at home. But what I started to learn, and I waited too long. I would have loved to start this 10 years ago. What I think is really important is that you have challenges in the workplace, because what you're going to learn is solutions. And so you're going to learn this in class, you're going to do all this work, and then you're going to implement. That's the greatest learning. And so I believe you have to have an avenue to practice what you're learning, because that's like if you learn a book, how to ride a bike from a book. I mean, it's like, okay, I'm going to start writing a book after I read this book. Well, how about starting after chapter 1 to get on and see how it's, the sitting. I think an ability to implement is one of the most critical things. So if you're super early in your career, you may want to wait a little bit. If you start getting challenged already, I dive in. Like it's so fulfilling to get a lot of those answers.
That sounds like good advice, and it's great to hear that the program is really helping you directly with those challenges that you're seeing every day in the working world. And obviously, it's a pretty significant investment financially for anybody to consider going to an MBA program. Do you feel that there is a reasonable return on investment from what you've seen so far?
It's funny you should ask. So this is going to be a long-winded answer. So I used to think that security was based on finances. So you make more money, you have more security in life. So I have one daughter. When my wife was pregnant, that was 32 years ago, have our first child in January of 1990, my world switched into how can I provide security for my family. I grew up. But with that, I had a false sense of security with financials. I had invested in a company called WorldCom. It was an absolute disaster. I was looking for how I can continue to make better returns, invested in this company, and they were fraudulent. I mean, I thought, how can a company that connects all these continents together with fiber optics ever go out of business? 2 years later, out of business. Lots of fraud in that organization. And it really woke me up. And I had a friend of mine who was a consultant. He said, Chuck, let me tell you something. You could drop me off in any country in the world, stark naked, and within a year I'd be a millionaire. I thought, first of all, that's a really weird statement. But what he was trying to say was, don't worry about financial stability. Worry about the knowledge and skills you have in your head. Because ultimately, you cannot predict and control what happens on the outside. You can only control what's on the inside. So what I'm trying to say is, there is no better return on investment than investing in yourself. Continuing to build the knowledge and skills carries with you wherever you go. Anything happens to you, you can have resilience. And I think that's one thing in life you can have control in and invest, and no one else can take it away from you. Outside of like killing you, there's no one that can take that investment away from you. How comforting is that? I mean, there's no better investment. There isn't, Andy. So I'm a hell yes. Hell yes, it's a great investment.
That's great to hear, Chuck. No, and I think that's a great story. Like you said, a little long-winded, but it makes the point really well. And you look at companies like WorldCom and Bernie Ebbers at the time, or what we see in the news now, like with Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos, and you think about companies like Enron, and you realize that we're not there just to teach how to be a great business person. But of course, part of our program, you've seen that for yourself, is in every course we really try to drive home ethical business, right?
Yeah.
It's capitalism's good, right? We need to make money. That's how we pay our employees. That's how we give our employees wages. That's how we give them great benefits. But it needs to be done ethically, and that's a big string that runs through the entire MBA program. And that was really great you mentioned that, because it gives us a chance to talk about how important ethics in business is, right?
Yeah, quite frankly, I didn't mention that as one of mine because I had a great family upbringing where that was built into the organization with the Anderson Statement of Principles. So that was sort of inbred in me from the beginning. You got to have a purpose, and you have to be doing it for the right reasons. And it's not just about money. And that's where you get into trouble as a leader, and you start making really bad decisions that really get you into trouble, no doubt. But the ethics, there's great teachings in the MBA program.
And that's a great point about the Andersons. It is so well known, for the culture here, and that being part of the culture. And it really does start at the top, and it started with your family making that part of the mission and the culture, and what makes it such a fantastic organization to be around and work with. Now, you're also in a great position to answer this next question, which isn't so much about the MBA program, but I'm sure that people that watch this video that are starting out in their career would love to hear your advice on this. For those people that are just starting out in their career, what sort of tips or advice would you offer them?
Andy, I had a major awakening 20 years ago or so. Sit in my office, and it comes to me. Why? I have no idea. A lot of times you'll hear in business, what's in it for me? And I figured out, a theory just popped in my head, and it's a lot of what John F. Kennedy was saying about don't ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So the same thing applies for business or any organization that you're in. If you think about it as what do I get out of this job or from this organization, you are strangling yourself in your ability to deliver and quite frankly blossom, because you can't control the organization, you can only control yourself. So I had a major awakening where I said, when I walk through those doors, I take off what's in it for me. And it's all about what's in it for the organization. What that does for you is it clarifies your thinking. You start to make very clear decision-making capabilities where you start to see, okay, what is going to happen with this? And every day you have these decisions to make. And if you are thinking purely on the behalf of the organization, you're going to make much crisper decisions. It was funny because about 6 months after making that decision on how I was going to run my career, people started noticing. I didn't have to go for jobs. They just basically said, Chuck, I want you to do this. Every time there was a department in trouble, Chuck, I need you to run that. Do I still run the other department? Oh yeah, you got that one too. And quite frankly, it was an absolute stunning part of my career, is just making that decision. It's not about me. And you think about what management should be thinking about. It's what is in it for the organization.
That's fantastic, and that's really great advice. And it is the right attitude to take. And obviously, if you do that and you transform yourself to think that way, as you're suggesting, over time, the rewards are going to come, right? Because others around you are going to recognize that, and those things will come, and they will come for the right reasons, won't they? That's why that's excellent advice.
Yeah.
So, Chuck, now what I'd like to do is speak to you about some questions that'll be of specific interest to some of the employees that are here at the Andersons, if you're ready for that.
Absolutely.
Very good. Now, the way we set this up at the Andersons, of course, is we bring the instructors and professors to you, and other than COVID currently, we run the courses here right at the Andersons, and we have cohorts that meet here in the evenings. What do you think are the benefits to that?
I can specifically remember the first class session I went to. It was like I'm working at my desk, I look at the clock, it's 5:15. I gotta go to class. I just walk upstairs, walk into a room, teacher's there, my fellow employees are there. It is just it's just a totally different experience for me. I absolutely loved being a part when the cohorts were here, pre-COVID. That was the best situation of learning I could ever imagine. If I could have just done my undergrad that way, it would have been beautiful.
Do you think, obviously, so it's nice, it's easy, you don't have to deal with traffic, you're working with your coworkers. Are there other advantages to that? Is there any networking opportunities that happen? Do you feel that it may be an improved learning experience for some reason? Are there other benefits to it?
So you think about how you learn in any class. So you learn from the book materials or reading materials or videos or any other things like that. You learn from your teacher and you learn from the other students. And the great thing about having a cohort here at the Andersons is the examples that you use in class are real world examples. And so your mind can connect with them so much better as opposed to something that arbitrary, you're reading a book about some example of an industry you don't know a darn thing about. The people that I'm working with here, and quite frankly, there's a lot of people that I would just say hi in the halls, that you start to connect with at a whole nother level. And now you see them in the halls and, hey, that example we had the other night, what did you think about that? And you just start, it embeds learning so much deeper. There's one other thing about that, in addition to learning, is you start to form bonds with people that you're gonna see over and over again through your career. And it's really helpful. You create friendships at the same time.
I think that's an astute observation because often those bonds can be something that, like you say, they last for the rest of your career and they can be extremely valuable and they're gonna happen naturally if you're a cohort working through the MBA program together. Another question about the Lourdes University MBA program and being an executive at the Andersons, do you think the program was rigorous enough and why?
That's a surprising question because there was weeks I was wondering, oh my God, this is too rigorous. So I'm interested in what the reason for that sort of question is, but from my standpoint, it was fine. There were classes it was probably a little bit too much. But that was maybe out of the 12 courses that I took, maybe a couple, where there just felt like, oh my God, spending my whole weekend working on this. But absolutely, it came to, as I looked, whether it's rigorous enough or not is probably not the point of focus. It's really, is there enough learning? And so I absolutely learned everything I wanted to learn out of that program. And so I'm a yes, it's plenty rigorous. And the great thing about it is you get to practice it on the job. And when I was going to undergrad, there was no practicing. You learned what you learned and you went to class the next day. I wasn't working, I was in the sports, so I wasn't working in college. And the ability to learn and then implement is quite frankly, that's the rigor. Can you do it when you get to the real world? And that, quite frankly, is outstanding. So when you're here and have the class sessions in this building, or if you're working remotely and you're working with other Anderson employees, being able to, and your classmates are going to hold you accountable too, because they're employees. Hey, you haven't been implementing that, when I've been in meetings with you. So I'm absolutely yes. It's plenty rigorous. It's all about the learning, quite frankly.
Fantastic. Yeah, a similar question as before, but a slightly different angle. For employees from the Andersons that are considering the MBA program, doing it as a cohort here at the Andersons, what advice do you have for them in making that decision?
Well, if you're interested, just call Frank. He'll pull you in. That's perfect. I would prefer that, quite frankly, because I was a little shy. But if you're at all interested, do it. It is so affordable. The Andersons makes it so affordable and easy for you. Lourdes is a perfect partner. Do it for the knowledge, not for the diploma. The reason I say that is because after every class, I got rewarded. I didn't have to wait 3 years to the end. Every class I had, and every time I read parts of a book, I got rewarded. It's a different way of thinking. And then you didn't have that delayed gratification. You were gratified almost instantly that, hey, I learned something new that I can implement in my job. That for me was transformational.
Well, that's fantastic. Sounds like solid advice. And again, Chuck, thank you for sitting
bet.
down and spending this time with us.
Yeah.
We talked about doing this Executive Spotlight series for a while, and it seemed really appropriate that you would be the first one. And again, congratulations on your upcoming graduation. Well, I know that students that are interested in the MBA program are really going to appreciate these answers that you've provided to these questions. And if you're wondering about the MBA program, it can be taken completely online, so you can be anywhere in the United States and be part of the MBA program, which is fantastic. We cover all these great areas like finance and strategy, decision-making, communications, finance, and obviously, because it's Lourdes University, ethics is a big part about what we teach as well, and ethics in business. So thank you again, Chuck. Really appreciate the time with these questions.